One thing that really struck me is, what is this tension between Canning and Snell? First off, just tell us quickly about Canning, who Canning is, and then tell us about Snell.
All right. Alf Canning was requested by the government to go out and survey the possibility of establishing a stock route between Willoona and Halls Creek. He proved it was feasible. Then he was put in charge of constructing all the wells, and he built them all by the mid of 1910, and the stock route was used 1911 through to about 1920, and it was starting to get into significant disrepair, and there were complaints that it wasn't getting enough water for the stock.
So they were still driving cattle through there at that time?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the drovers were having to clean out wells and repair things. And
Big job.
Yeah, and so by about 1929 there was a major effort from the Kimberley pastoralists to fix the Canning stock route, and the government said, righto, let's do it. They put the funding in place, much to the complaints of people in Perth that said it was a white elephant and was only benefiting a few. And in 1930 the government asked a bushman pastoralist in the Willoona area by the name of William Snell to take a team and go out and restore the wells so that the stock could continue to come down and get reasonable supply of water.
Along the way. How many wells were in place?
All of them, 51.
51.
Oh, well, there wasn't 51 when Snell went through.
No.
Because Mr. Snell built 3A and 4A and 4B and whatever. He added a few to the list at the bottom end.
So the ones with the A's on, folks, that's Mr. Snell's doing.
Yes.
And he did that because he thought the distances were too wide, you were saying?
He said that the distances between the wells was too far for his sheep. Mr. Snell had a station, pastoral station, around about well 8 or 9 called Bridle Face, and he ran sheep there. And he thought, well, this is my chance to put a few wells in at the expense of the government, and so he did. And it suited his needs, and he said it would help others in the district as well. And then he continued on and restored the other wells. And he got to the extreme heat of summer. They had to pull out and return because they would have perished out there. It's just too hot to work.
Yeah. And
come back at the next season. And then complaints started to filter through to the government about Snell's work, that it was poor quality, it wasn't to the standard the government expected. And
keeping in mind that this was a very expensive engineering enterprise, wasn't it?
Yes, it certainly was. And so the government decided not to use Snell the following year. They went and asked Alf Canning if he would be willing to come out of retirement, and Canning was 70 years of age, and he said yes. And by the time he got to do the job, he was 71. And then when he got to Willoona to gather up all the camels and equipment and everything that Snell had used the previous year, he couldn't find a lot of it. Snell was using it for his own personal needs. He let camels go. He said he didn't know where some of the camels were. Some were out on the rabbit-proof fence, some were all over the place. He was an enterprising chap.
So basically, the kind of tension really was caused more by the fact that he was uncooperative. He didn't do things to standards.
That's right. He did. Well, when Canning started to restore the wells, he found that Snell's work wasn't suitable. He had to deepen wells to get them more flow, because it's one thing to say, oh, this well's got 500 gallons of water in it. It's the recovery that's important. If you don't get enough recovery and fast enough, you can't water all the stock. There was all those sorts of issues. Some of the troughs were allegedly held up with chips of rocks and whatever, rather than put in position with posts and that, because you only need one big beast to stand on the end of the trough, and there's the end of your rocks and all your water and everything.
That's true. The construction had to be fairly robust. And when
Yeah.
we went through, I was quite impressed, Phil, with the ones that hadn't been restored, that they still kind of
Yeah, that's
pretty good, some of them, eh?
Well, Canning found that if he used desert oak to make it work properly, they had to boil it. They boiled it and boiled the timbers, so all the well timbers and all the posts in it were all boiled to get rid of the sap. And that's why, and it makes them more termite proof.
Right.
And that's why they're still standing after 100 years
Yeah.
or 110 years.
Well, that's the difference, I suppose, between a stockman who just patches it together and keeps moving
Yes.
and someone who builds to standards. One thing I had heard was that Snell, he did not have the problems with the Aborigines that Canning did. I just
No.
wondered if you mind commenting on that.
Well, there was different eras. We're
For a
talking
start,
about
yep.
1906 to 1910 when Canning originally was out in our country.
Yep.
And by 1930, when Snell went out to restore, there'd already been more than 20, 25 years of interaction with drovers, and
true.
people were getting used to, the Aborigines were getting used to what was going on. Whether they liked it or not was another thing, but
Sure.
they were getting used to and they understood who these people were. When Canning went through, they were terrified. The men sitting on camels, they thought they were gods, and pretty scary stuff, and that's why.
So it could have been a bit about the product of the era, that, you know, they've
Yes.
become... And the other thing, obviously, is there's different requirements. Snell knew where the wells were by that
Yes.
point, so he didn't have to.
Yes, he didn't have to go and drill for water, divine, or work out that it's too far to put a well here, we've got to go back or over to the west. But once all the wells were in place, it was a lot easier. And by then, the Aboriginal people that were using the wells, I mean, there was a lot of damage done to the wells by the Aboriginal people because, well, they didn't know how to get the water out of them. They were being injured by the windlasses and falling in, and
That's that windy thing.
you know, if they didn't know how to use a windlass. If you don't hang on to it, you could get yourself knocked out by the steel handle, or
That's
even
right.
killed.
Yeah.
And the other thing was they'd fall in and didn't know how to get out. And
Well, I wouldn't know either, even
But-
today.
there's then there's the spiritual element of the Aboriginal people's connection with the land
And the water,
and the
particularly
water
waterways.
and the interference. They saw the interference with their country, and these big herd of cattle would come through and the water would disappear. Enough water that would have lasted them all year is gone, and they just saw this as it put them at huge risk, and so this started to generate the attacks and the smashing of the wells and burning of some of them.
That's right. They did quite a lot of damage, and Snell commented on that, and he said that it's because they can't access the water. And his remedy for that was to put a ladder in. The water was kind of, with these windlass, was more geared towards having animals help, wasn't it?
Yes.
Because, yeah, they could turn these blasted things around.
Yeah, or they would use a pulley system and a
Yeah.
whip pole and use a camel to walk off and drag up
Exactly,
the
which
drums of water.
Aboriginal people didn't have. So
They didn't have the animals, and they also didn't understand
They didn't know how it
the understanding of winding the handle and grabbing the buckets and whatever. That's just it's all foreign to them.
So that was a difficult point, but it's good to just kind of get a bit of a handle on it. You know, see what we think is happening here, to give you an inkling of what these guys really did and what it took to put these places together. These engineering feats.
Yeah.
Work completed, Canning.
Don't read it in bed; you'll get concussion if it hits you.
Yeah. No, it's a fantastic book, comprehensive. Goes from 1906 to 2010. Available from Hesperian Press. I'll put a link in. Again, thank you very much, Phil. It's been
Pleasure.
so interesting.
Always a pleasure.
Very interesting. So I want to thank you. I want to also special plug Getaway 4-Wheel Drive Club. Great club if anyone's interested. There'll be a link going in.
Great
And
club.
It is a great club. That's it from Rona's Roadshow. Goodbye. We'll see you next time. You can like, subscribe if you want. See you later. Bye-bye.
Awesome.